But at this time, it's probably about time we get into the news. Now, I got to tell you that, over the Christmas holidays, there just, wasn't a whole lot of interesting stuff going on. There just, wasn't anything interesting happening in the news. And I had thought seriously about, maybe just not even doing a news rant tonight because, there just ain't nothing going on, right? I mean, the news has been nothing but boring recently. Nothing's been going on. Yeah, right. I'm not a big television watcher. And, frankly, I'm not a big Alex Jones fan. Every once in a while, Alex Jones has an interesting guest on, and even though he tends to overtalk the guest to the point where I can't really hear what the guest has to say, doesn't matter. I'll catch Jones's show when he has a good guest on that I want to hear what the fella has to say. But one thing I gotta say is that when the media becomes the news, we're in trouble, okay? Now, recently there was a debate, I guess, between, some effeminate feller from across the ocean named Morgan or something, Pierce. He's got one of these, kind of fruity names, Pierce. He speaks with a funny accent. You can't hardly understand what the fellow says. And this alternative, what's referred to as alternative media feller named Jones, who at least speaks with an accent that makes him understandable. Well, this guy Jones, he's kind of known for talking over people and being kind of animated in his way of handling things, and a lot of us are a little put off by his approach. It's one of those things. I mean, it's something you either like him or you don't. Now, fact of the matter is that this divide and conquer scenario, where various factions of what is loosely referred to as the truth movement or patriot movement or whatever you choose to call it, is very divisive. If we remain divided, we will be conquered. And, after watching this debate, I did not watch it on television. I can't bring myself to turn on a television, but did catch it on YouTube. It's about a 14-minute segment on YouTube of these two guys going at it. And, if I was to judge this thing based on debating rules, I would have said, well, the moderator should have grabbed Jones by the scruff of his neck, dragged him out of there, and give him a whooping behind the woodshed, okay? Because, obviously he did not adhere to anything approaching civilized debate. But, most Americans are not tuned in to that type of thing. They would have judged it based on a football game. And they'd looked at it and they said, well, Jones was taking the ball into his end zone every time. And that guy never even, he never even got a pass off, He never gained any yardage. Jones was just running that ball into the end zone right and left. Boy, Jones tore him all up, And I've heard both sides of the argument. Now, one argument I've heard that I found a little distressing was that, Jones, as a representative for firearms owners, did us more harm than good by his animated approach to the conversation. Well, I got to say that looking at events as they're coming down, I can kind of understand somebody having some level of righteous indignation. Now, there is a clause in the Constitution. It's actually in the Second Amendment to the Constitution. It has second place right behind your guarantees to speak your mind for a very good reason, because it was held second in importance only to your right to freely express your point of view. So your very first right is the right to say what's on your mind. Number 2 is your right to protect yourself without any conditions. As a matter of fact, the way it reads in the Constitution is the right of the citizen shall not be infringed. Your right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They didn't say may not be infringed. They said shall not be infringed. There's a subtle difference. If they had said may not be infringed, that would have implied that under certain circumstances, we might be able to infringe a little bit. Okay? When they say shall not be infringed, that is very specific. That means under no circumstances. There are no circumstances, no matter how many kids get killed, no matter how many whack jobs who've taken too many SSRIs go off the reservation and do something stupid, there are no good reasons to infringe upon law-abiding citizens' right to keep and bear arms. Any arms. Now, right now in the United States of America, the average person's not allowed to have a bazooka. Not allowed to have one. Not allowed to have a machine gun. It's just not permitted. Those are considered Class 3 devices. Only under very special circumstances. You got to pay a special bribe to some politician somewhere, and they got to know exactly where it's kept and exactly how it's kept, and you get all kinds of conditions, all sorts of infringements are placed on your right to own, say, a tank, or a bazooka, or an anti-aircraft gun, something capable of taking down a drone, or a machine gun. Okay, all sorts of special requirements, all sorts of infringements on your right to keep and bear that type of arm. Now, a lot of people have, well, gee, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you shouldn't have a bazooka. Why not? Why not? If I could afford one and I want one, because it's not the bazooka that's going to do the damage. It's me loading it up, pointing it at something I wish to go boom, and making that target disappear. That is the criminal act. Possessing the device, in theory, should not be infringed. Now they're talking about wanting to make just about anything that is semi-automatic fall under the Class 3 heading. Not only that, but it appears that our president feels like he has the right to just, by fiat, declare semi-automatic weapons to be Class 3 type weapons, which require all these special infringements, basically in the same category as a bazooka, as a tank, or as a machine gun. Now, the problem is, there are millions and millions and millions of them types of weapons that are out there. A lot of them were bringbacks. Soldiers brought them back from wars that were fought back in the early 1900s. Okay, this type of weapon has been around since the late 1800s. So we're talking about a firearm design that goes back more than 100 years that we should be denied. Our right should be infringed. See, there's a prevailing notion being espoused by, fellows like this, effeminate twerp from England, Morgan, whatever his name is, and guys like our president and Joe, yes, I am a Zionist, Biden, our vice president. They seem to have this attitude that the only reason we're permitted firearms, and they like to think that we are permitted firearms, like they have granted us the right. The government has granted us the right to have certain firearms for purposes of recreational shooting and hunting. Yes, you're good little boys. You can have a muzzle loader to go shoot Bambi with for dinner. But, a semi-automatic. Now, where they got this notion, I don't know. Because any constitutional scholar, I refer you to Judge Napolitano, who's spoken on this on many occasions recently. No. The guarantees that we held back from the government when we signed the social contract called the Constitution was that we would maintain adequate firepower in the hands of the average citizen, that if the government ever forgot its place, by force of arms, if necessary, we would cast them aside and put something in their place that better suits us, as is our right. Now, I remember when, the toughest decision about, an AR versus an AK was, which characteristics do I prefer? Darn, that AR has a nice flat trajectory. It reaches out maybe 600 yards. It's incredibly accurate. The machining on the thing is beautiful. It is a very precise, very nicely designed, almost space age type weapon. And then you look at that AK and it's a little rough, it's not quite that nicely machined. It's all made out of, sheet metal stampings. It looks kind of cheap and it doesn't quite have the range and the accuracy, but boy, it throws a bigger slug and it hits harder, and you can absolutely treat the thing terrible and it still works. Boy, the personality differences are they're radically different weapons, different approaches to the same purpose. A killing machine. These are weapons. They are indeed designed to kill. They both do the job exceptionally well. And it used to be that, the toughest decision that you had was which platform was best for you. Now, these are semi-automatic weapons. They're not covered currently under the rules related to a Class 3 firearm. But the fact is, they do kind of look like military hardware. It's on purpose. I mean, let's face it. I mean, a lot of the guys will be buying these weapons. They came back from the military. They're very familiar with this design. They're very familiar. They want a civilian version of the weapon they carried during their experiences in war. And of course, if you're a consumer and you want a good quality firearm, what do you want to buy? Well, you want to buy something as close as you can get to what the military has put their stamp of approval on and says is, suitable for military use. So, of course, guns of this type are very popular in the marketplace. To hell with what they look like. They're a very functional design. They do the job they were intended to do extremely well. They are very effective and very efficient at what they do. So it used to be that your toughest choice was the AK or AR. AK or AR. Well, here pretty soon, it looks like you might have another choice to make. Are you going to keep your AR? Are you going to keep your AK? Or are you going to be a good citizen and turn it in when El Presidente produces his executive order that all of a sudden makes what used to be a perfectly legal firearm somehow now illegal? Now, those of our politicians are not foolish. They realize, they know what's in the Constitution. But see, they've got a slightly different point of view on it than we have. When the Constitution guaranteed you the right to keep and bear arms, it didn't come right out and say, well, you have the right to keep and bear an AK-47. You have a right to keep and bear an AR-14, an AR-15. It didn't say that specifically. So, they've got the idea that, the right to keep and bear arms can mean whatever they determine it means. And they're going to be very reasonable. They're going to make sure that you are indeed allowed to keep and bear arms that they consider politically correct. So what's the end result? At some point or another, you're going to have to decide where your line in the sand is. Our rights have been trampled on considerably over the last 10, 15, 20, I don't know. Depends on how far you want to go back. Some say that, this snowball started rolling down the hill back in 1871. Some say it goes back that far. Some put it back as far as 1858. Hard to really put a point of demarcation. But I can tell you that over the years, the speed of that snowball rolling down the hill has increased significantly. And it appears that they are now after your Second Amendment guarantees. The Fourth Amendment is already pretty much trashed. The Fifth Amendment, if they're allowed to waterboard you enough, you might just incriminate yourself. And that waterboarding seems to be okay now. So they're after the Second. What's left? What's left? Now, at some point or another, going to have to decide, have they crossed your line in the sand? Sorry, I can't answer that question for you. You're going to have to make up your own damn mind. And that was Scarecrow's News Rant for January 10th, 2013. There was a lot more that went on in the news, but that seems to be the one that pissed me off. All right. We have come to the close of the very first Smart Scarecrow show for 2013. I hope everybody enjoyed tonight's presentation. But as is the tradition, just before I bow out of here for the evening, close it down, get my jammies on, and trundle off to bed, I will do my best to take on any last-minute issues that the live audience in the chat room might have for me. Anybody out there got any issues that only I can handle? Going once. Why can't Sterling respect Mark's opinion? Why can't Mark respect Sterling's? You know, they have different points of view. The idea is to listen to as many points of view as you possibly can. Do any one of us know all of the answers? Absolutely not. We're all guessing our best based on what we perceive. And, if you can't actually be there to see every one of these widgets, you listen to a couple of different fellas who have. And okay, well, this guy said this, that guy said that. What do I believe? And use your own filter. I think they will tax ammo. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. Now, my crystal ball is certainly, no clearer than any other soothsayer out there. But here's what I think is going to happen. They're going to make semi-automatic weapons illegal by executive fiat. The President of the United States is going to get up on a soapbox and say, you folks don't really need those, so we're going to classify those all as Class 3. You have to take them down to the local police department. You have to register them, and you have to pay the $200 tax, and you have to do all the necessary nonsense that you would normally have to do with a machine gun, a bazooka, hand grenades, or a tank. Okay? Most Americans are going to ignore the law. They're going to look at it, and they're going to say, you're out of your effing mind. There is no way. Okay? Which immediately makes about 20% of the citizens of the United States criminals in the eyes of the federal government, subject to a 20-year jail term and fines that you don't even want to think about. Okay? So basically what they have done is they have taken this segment of the population who they think might be troublesome to their long-term goals, and they have criminalized them to a point where at any time a whole bunch of guys in Darth Vader suits can just crash in your door at 2:30 in the morning. They always come in the wee hours of the morning when you're just snoozing away, and half a dozen guys in Darth Vader outfits will just come into your house and snatch you away, put a black bag over your head, and nobody will ever see or hear of you again. Because you are, by definition, a terrorist under the law, and you are keeping Class 3 firearms, against the rules. Okay? Now, that'll happen for probably 10 years, and most Americans will not even make a peep. You don't believe me? Well, we've already had Ruby Ridge. We've already had Waco. Where was the righteous indignation over those invasions? Oh, well, they were some kind of whacked out Christian group who was who was abusing their children. Or, he did cut off a shotgun. So that gave him the right to shoot the man's wife. Protecting those abused children gave them the right to burn them all. There have been incidents already in our history, in our very recent history, that should have been galvanizing events. And Joe Blow sits on the sofa, drinks beer, and watches football. Okay? That's what I think is going to happen. Please prove me wrong.